Well, in studio with me now is, of course, the spokesperson for NSFAS himself, Ishmael Mnisi. Thank you so much for your time. So you have heard, some of the concerns that have been raised there by the students. And one of the interesting things that TVET Etlanjwa said was that, this is the first time essentially that we are seeing an upfront payment from the Department of Higher Education to various institutions, and yet we're still finding ourselves with a situation where the dissemination of funds, the allocation of students is still not being met. What is the plan? What is the problem?
Well, firstly, let's start with the upfront payment. It was indicated publicly. We came out to say we've made that upfront payment and what that upfront payment is for. We did indicate that it's meant to alleviate pressures on accommodation and also issues relating to the study materials that needed to be provided for our students. And we know that on top of that, we did confirm that we made arrangements with our institutions that all NSFAS students must not pay registration fee, and that has been implemented. Now, probably the disjuncture is on the issues of the interpretation of what that amount ought to be doing in various institutions. Remember, that money is sent to universities and TVET colleges, and which is some of the things that we are going to meet the institutions themselves to further clarify on how that money is meant to be done. This disbursement was done on the 31st of January, and now we are in the middle of February. So the issue of whether that money is there or not, indeed it is there in the institutions, and we expect it to be used for what it is meant to be used. Now, so in other words, directly responding to ASIVE, there is a plan for us to have dispersed that money. Firstly, we can't disperse without a plan. We knew that we are going to be confronted with some of these challenges, and in anticipation of that, we then made these disbursements. That's number one. But coming to the issue of the allowances, because there's a difference between what student gets as allowances, personal allowances, and what goes to institutions as tuition, and what goes to private accommodation providers, or including institutions as accommodation. Now, we have met SAUS themselves, we have met other student leaders, and we did make a confirmation that the first month of payment of allowances, it's in February. Institutions just opened 2 weeks ago. Now, we are not out of alignment of the payment of the first disbursements. Now, we have issued a statement indicating that process.
Did you indicate when exactly those allowances will be paid? Because as far as he is concerned, he said that probably come the 1st of March, some students will still not have these allowances.
As I'm saying, we did indicate to them that the first month of the payment of allowances is by the end of February in terms of our calculations, because we start to pay in Feb and up until October, only for 10 months. That's when those allowances will be paid. We issued a statement indicating the processes of that disbursement. And in our statement, we categorically stated that our direct payment service providers will continue to do that work because we still have or are contracted to that. However, we are also making other arrangements with institutions themselves, and particularly to deal with the issues of immediacy on the payment of those allowances, to say that we will also look at injecting more of tranche amounts to institutions to also assist us in the disbursement. So we are meeting USAF tomorrow to look at that proposal that we have made to them, that whilst we are looking at these whole issues, can institutions as well come on board to make sure that we don't fall out of the stipulated times for payments.
As it stands now, and I want us to clarify again, just in terms of those payments, particularly for the benefit of our viewers. So you've made upfront payments of 2.8 billion rands to universities,
yes,
and 580 million rands to TVET colleges. As it stands now, are there students who have qualified for the funding? Are they all, registered? Are they all in residences? Do they all have accommodation? I think that's fundamental. That's important. We've seen protests at the beginning of this month of February in the Eastern Cape, particularly, where students were saying that they've qualified and they are still without, residence. They are still without, classes. They can't even go to classes. They don't have the necessary material that they need. We've just heard now from Asive also that students are, staying in makeshift spaces. So we're still seeing the historic challenges, even though there is this upfront payment. So I just want confirmation from you where the gaps are, where the challenges are in terms of just from those students that have qualified.
Well, two-part answer to your question. Firstly, as I've said, the upfront payment were very specific for what they are meant for, and we will get a report from institutions of whether that has been dispersed in accordance to our directive of what those disbursements are made for. And then when it relates to student accommodation, it is part of what the disbursement is made for. But then there is a process of student accommodation. You know that NSFAS is currently running a pilot project to assist in as far as accrediting of private accommodation providers. We are piloting it with 17 universities and 23 TVET colleges. Now, you've mentioned a case of PCC as an example that one can make. The challenge is there was the uptake of an understanding of the students in as far as what that means if they are in a pilot and they must go into residencies that have been accredited by NSFAS. Our officials have been there. The board of NSFAS yesterday was there to meet all the stakeholders there and clarify what that actually means in terms of the students having to stay in accredited accommodation and so on. And this is an intervention, I must say, Unati, that NSFAS brought as a result of the challenges that students were crying about.
And I mean, Ishmael, I think the students do appreciate that you are having and making these initiatives, but we want to see a time where these initiatives are not made at the beginning of an academic year. When will we reach that point? I mean, one of the accusations that Asive was making, and I know various other sectors are making the same accusations, is that where there is funding, the problem is with the administration of that funding. And that's where the accusations of misalignment in terms of funding, administrative structures that are not in place, of course, within NSFAS, malfeasance, corruption. All of these are then being put squarely, on the feet of NSFAS in as far as these gaps are concerned, these challenges are concerned, saying that, the funding is there. This year, you've made the department has made the payment up front. Where then do we look at? Let's look at squarely at NSFAS. Could the problem be with yourselves in as far as some of these accusations are concerned? There are several investigations that are currently being made, and as I've said earlier on, the chair of the board of NSFAS has taken leave of absence because of some of these accusations.
Well, let's start with the cycle of government planning and how they actually appropriate money to government institutions. The Minister of Finance just spoke yesterday. The academic year has already begun 2-3 weeks ago. Now, in terms of that planning we are talking about, it means NSFAS must be able to put money aside for it to be able to begin the academic year without the appropriation that would have been made on that particular year to deal with the immediate issues that we are talking about. If NSFAS did not do so, we should not be having these upfront payments that we have made. So we have improved on that planning as compared to the previous years to make sure that there is money available, appropriated. When we receive money from government, we then can continue in terms of the funding of all our beneficiaries. That's one. We are improving our systems and planning processes to make sure that all issues relating to the applications themselves arrives on to NSFAS on time, gets processed, and then we then start with the allocation. But you can't be looking at it only on the NSFAS end. Let's look at the system again, the educational system. We received matriculation results this year on the 19th of January. And majority of those applicants have to be accommodated in the current year, so that they are not excluded for them to start next year. So then what did that mean? We needed to extend the application period. We were closing on the 31st of January. We had to close on the 15th of February as we speak. And NSFAS had to process all those applications in a week, in 2 weeks' time, to make sure that there is no student that is left behind. So as I'm saying, yes, we are on the coal face, and it looks like NSFAS is not doing its work, but to the contrary, NSFAS is pulling all the stops to make sure that there are no students who are left unattended, who are left not covered. In relation to the issues of maladministration and corruption, we know that there has been a forensic report that was initiated by the board of NSFAS. Recommendations were made, and NSFAS is implementing those recommendations. And part of it, we know that senior management of NSFAS had to be relieved from their responsibilities. There are currently internal disciplinary processes that are ongoing to make sure that all those that were involved are held accountable. In relation to the issue of the chair, which is unrelated anyway to the Werksman report, but it emanates as a result of the tapes that were there. The chair did an honorable thing by himself deciding to recuse himself or take leave of absence so that NSFAS can be able to investigate all these allegations without him. And on his own side, he's also pursuing legal actions against those that made those allegations.
Right.
So these are attempts by an organization that is caring, that wants to make sure that malfeasance, issues of corruptions are dealt with.
All right, Ishmael, thank you so much for your time. That's all the time we have, unfortunately, on the show. But thank you so much for coming through. Of course, that was the NSFAS spokesperson, Ishmael Mnisi. Of course, this conversation will continue throughout, the channel in terms of how far students are in terms of accommodation, as it will also relate to just registration at various institutions in the country. Of course, the issue of allowances and accommodation is still a sticking point, and in as far as the NSFAS is concerned. So we'll definitely have all our role players back in studio sometime soon just for an update.